Funding for With You All the Way is provided by HEB.
My name is Trevor Romain. In order to learn more about how to help kids deal with deployment, I went on a mission with the USO to a few military bases to see what I could find.
It's Fort Bragg. I'm here at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. Good morning. It is a beautiful day here in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Thank you very much. Oh, how cool are you guys?
After talking to hundreds and hundreds of military kids about dealing with pre-deployment, deployment, and reintegration, I asked kids, teens, and parents to share some of their own thoughts on the subject.
I did. It's missed 3 of my last birthdays.
My mom's the one that cooks, so that was really bad 2 months. Just my dad and I were cooking, and my brothers, they're already like 21, 22, and they already were gone, so in college. So it was just me and Dad, so the house felt really empty.
If I ever get lonely in the house now, I usually just go over to my dog.
I'm doing my mom's chores for extra, and so that when she comes back, she doesn't have to do a lot of work, because she's gone for a year.
It was hard, especially when he goes to Iraq. Sometimes I'm thinking that he's probably not gonna come back, and I'm not gonna see him again.
I'm Bill Maul, President and CEO of KLRN, Public Television. Welcome. We're inviting you tonight to be with us for a symposium that we call With You All the Way. It's hosted by the Comfort Crew for Military Kids, and we're here to celebrate and honor our military families for the profound sacrifices that they have made in the last 10 years in particular, and to take the time to understand the unique challenges that children face growing up with a parent serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. We hope you come away from this discussion with a greater awareness of our patriotic obligation to support a new generation of military children. And we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. First of all, Sergeant First Class Dana Bowman, retired U.S. Army. From the Golden Knights, Dana has done over 1,000 jumps, and he has a remarkable story of resiliency. He has the distinction of being the first double amputee to re-enlist in the United States Army. Dana, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your service. And next, I want you to meet Dr. Angela Huebner. Angela is Associate Professor in the Department of Human Development at Virginia Tech University. She has been working with military families for 17 years, and this includes clinical work as well as research work with military youth and with adolescents. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Good to have you with us. Next, I want to meet Dr. Gail Siller. Dr. Siller has been superintendent of the Fort Sam Houston Independent School District in San Antonio. She's a native Texan. Dr. Siller has dedicated her professional career to inspire students to their highest levels of learning. Welcome. Nice to have you with us. And last but not least, hardly, our good friend Trevor Romain, the co-founder of Comfort Crew for Military Kids. Trevor has been working for more than 20 years in speaking and working with and inspiring children about some of life's toughest challenges. Most recently, Trevor has been on a unique USO tour that has taken him to military bases around the world where he talks and meets and teaches kids all about all kinds of issues, including deployment and reintegration. So welcome our panel. We're delighted to have all of you with us. Yeah. There are close to 1 million children across our nation who have had a parent deploy at least one time if not multiple times, in the first decade of what we now call the War on Terror. Dr. Siller, I want to go first to you, if you would. Give us a sense of what the impact is on the kids you work with, whether they're elementary, middle school, or high school.
A lot of it depends on their level of resiliency. But overall, we do see certain characteristics that are repeated time after time in children. Children who never went to a counselor all of a sudden need the help of a counselor. Sometimes it's dealing with what used to be relatively simple things now have become very complicated. Whether it's at school or home, stress intensifies their reaction to things. We're also seeing a sense of anxiety with some of our students. They just feel, the younger they are, the more clingy they are to their teacher or to a parent or who is at home with them. We see them when the parent brings the child to school, for instance, they want to cling to that parent and are reluctant to let that person go, to stay in school. They need someone to listen to them. They want to talk to them. At the middle school, we see a sense of loss. A lot of times they'll say things like, Dad's missing my activities. He's not here to see me, play baseball or be in the school play or something like that. That same sense is there at the high school. A lot of times the parents trying to keep things as comfortable as possible, juggling all the same routines that they did before, whether it be all the after-school activities and things like that. And it's difficult for that parent to do if they have their spouse is deployed. So something gets left behind, and the kids feel that, and it's tough on them. They report sometimes just a little bit of chaos at home. Routines are different.
And they probably make a little trouble from time to time. Isn't that kind of an issue too?
That happens as well. That's a common
out.
reaction. So sometimes we see anger come through, and that turns into acting out at school.
Is that common across all grade levels, or younger ones more than others?
It varies. You can see it. A lot of it depends on how well the parent at home is handling it and able to communicate with the child that this is something Dad does, has to go away with his job. But it can happen at different times. We see kiddos who are frustrated a lot. Sometimes our seniors, for instance, will say something like, oh, I don't know how to fill out this financial aid form. I wish my dad were here to help me. They'll talk about things that the father is missing.
So in many ways, a sense of deprivation, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And cutting off. I want to move to Dr. Huebner. You clearly both do research in this and do clinical work in it. Right. So what are your experiences with these children who have parents deployed?
Sure. I can specifically speak about youth and adolescents, more so as my area of expertise. But to echo what Dr. Silman said, I think it's hard to categorize that there's one particular outcome for these young people. It's not all bad, it's not all good. And I think what people tend to forget is that the adjustment after really depends on how the family was doing before the deployment. There's not as though there's some magic bullet and then the family does better or worse. So what we see in adolescence is really more acting out behaviors in some cases, more acting in behaviors in others, so that they might become more withdrawn, more quiet, less asking for help. Kids in our studies talked a lot about wanting to be protective of the at-home parent, taking on more responsibilities for the at-home parent because they could see that they were under pressure. I think it's really important for us to remember that for many adolescents, this is the only lifestyle that they remember, because this conflict has been going on for so long that this is a way of life for them.
And is there a difference with multiple deployments? Or do kids ever get used to this?
It's a great question. What I saw clinically and anecdotally from our studies and in the rest of the research literature, one clinical family said to me, it's our second deployment, and you would think this would be easier, but it's actually worse because I know what to expect. Right. So I don't think it gets easier. I think what we have to pay attention to is what's happening systemically. In other words, we can tax the system. So do they have a chance for their resources to come back? Do they continue to get support from the community? Or do people start to get bored, which we see a lot with the 1% helping? The rest of the community often is excited about bringing meals, seeing how you're doing the first month.
I would think that both of you at Fort Sam and in your university environment would have an opportunity to teach people how to handle children like this. So what do you do for the teachers? How do you prepare them and for other caregivers to take care of the needs of these young people?
The thing that I work with them clinically and in the research and in forums like this is to talk to the parents about really taking care of themselves first, because the #1 predictor of how the kids adjust is how that at-home parent does. And that's an awful lot of stress to put on the system. It doesn't mean it's going to break the system, but we really have to pay attention to the kind of care that the at-home parent's getting. When the at-home parent is depressed or anxious, that really impacts their ability to caretake their adolescents or their younger children. And when they become less sensitive in their parenting, then there's poor outcomes for the youth. The young people will be less likely to confide in their parents because they see they're already stressed. They'll internalize much of that behavior. Or children in our studies talked about lashing out and recognizing that they were lashing out at people in inappropriate ways. And they knew it was because they were trying to hold in all this stress, but not able to contain it for that long.
Are there some tools that caregivers, teachers can give them for dealing with it? Is that part of what you're teaching?
Absolutely. I think part of it is helping adults learn what's normative for kids. That's the first thing. So know what's normative behavior for an adolescent anyway. Yeah. Know how your kid was before the deployment. Know how your family was before the deployment. Because if communication in the family wasn't great before the deployment, it's not going to improve during the deployment. It's going to go down the same negative path. So I think the more we can do to prepare families before the separation, in terms of communication, in terms of knowing what to expect, in terms of recognizing that this is hard. Right. That's really important.
Well, it is hard, and that's, I guess, one of the reasons Trevor has had such a valuable experience in doing interaction with him and USO tours. What are the kids telling you about multiple deployments, Trevor?
Well, it's very interesting because there's one thing I wanted to say first is that we have noticed compassion fatigue with caregivers. And that's one of the things when you have a teacher who has 30 children in the classroom and a lot of them may be deployed at one time, it's really tough. We've seen a lot of very interesting and very thought-provoking scenes from these children. One young girl came up to me and said that her mother lies on the bed curled up in a ball and with the room door closed, and this little girl said that she sits outside the door waiting for her mom to get up, and when she hears her mom getting up she runs back to her room. And I said, do you tell your mom what's going on? She said, no, my mom's worried enough already, I don't want her to worry about me. So you talk about the child carrying the burden. There was another young boy who said to us that his father was on the 4th deployment, and he said, do you know what? The statistics show that he's got more chance of getting shot every time he goes. So this is a 10-year-old who's actually looking at statistics of injury with a child. One of the other things too is that obviously a military child comes from a family where you are strong and you suck it up. And so often they don't want to be babies, they don't want to show that they are fearful or lonely, and they will just really internalize all their anxiety. There was a young girl who told us recently that her father isn't very happy with her crying, and he has suggested that she does air squats instead.
Is that one of the tools you teach? Air squats.
So really, we have spoken to hundreds of thousands of kids over the years, and especially on this particular tour that we've been going, that these kids really are feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and a lot of frustration, and a lot of loneliness.
And Trevor, I don't think we've made it really totally clear that you are on a 2-year worldwide tour for the USO to do just this kind of work in being both a teacher and a listener, a companion friend for these children.
Yeah, you know, so often we spend a lot of our time telling children what we think they need to hear instead of listening to what they're asking for. And what we've done on this tour is listen to what kids are asking for and then give them tools to be able to tackle the subjects that are bothering them.
What kind of a tool?
We have kits that go out. We have a deployment kit. We have a grief kit, grief comfort kit. We even have a kit for wounded warriors, both wounded physically or emotionally. So we have journals, we have videos, we have postcards, and we find that journaling is very, very important and very effective.
I want to move to another kind of subject here regarding multiple deployments. Let's listen to what the children have to say about that.
It was exciting when he got back, but he was a little bit more strict. When he left the first time, he had a lot of hair, and then when he came back, he was bald.
He was bald. Oh wow, so he physically looks different.
It was weird.
Like when my dad came home, he was really stressed. I mean, his job's hard, and then come home to like the family and just different things. And I mean, it's hard, but just to be patient and really understanding, and try to help him.
Well, we have all seen the news reports from the touching scenes of families being reunited when a parent returns home from a deployment. But there's another side to the story. That's not the end of it. Families tell us that the transition back home can be just as challenging, if not more challenging, than the deployment itself. So we recognize that not all situations are the same. Dr. Huebner, maybe you can give us a sense of what that's like in these families.
Right. I think at this point it's really important for families to recognize that everybody has changed. So the service member's been gone for 12 months, 18 months, depending on the service, but the young person has grown up. The spouse at home has had other experiences, and the service member themselves is a changed person. And so for families to expect to be able to come back and have things the way they were before isn't realistic. Many of the young people in our studies talked about, in our case, dad coming back and wanting to treat them the way they were before, and recognizing and verbalizing to us, we're not the same. We've grown up, and he doesn't recognize the transitions we've made, the responsibilities we're taking on.
And isn't it true that in many ways the father or mother who was deployed is not the same?
Exactly.
They've had experiences that have changed them.
Exactly. And I think the whole system needs to know to be gentle, because it's reintegration is the right word. We're trying to figure out how to recalibrate this family. It can't go back the way that it was, so they have to move forward together and make it into something uniquely different, but that's still theirs.
And so, again, tools.
Right.
What kinds of tools do you have for them?
One of the things we talk to them about is making very explicit rules and rituals. Not rules in the rules way, but this is how our family's operating now. So when the deployment happens, making sure that there are still rituals the family does, be it eating together or pizza night, whatever that is, but it's discussed so that the rules and expectations are clear for every family member. What's your role? Have another one of those meetings when the service member returns to say, now it's time to renegotiate this. It may be that people have to give up roles that they had previously. It may be that they don't want to give them up. It may be that they just have to come to a new consensus, but they have to talk about it.
Well, and in particular with adolescents,
Absolutely.
There's so much going on in their lives
Exactly.
anyway that stress them.
Right.
This has to complicate it.
Exactly, and I think it is important to remember that adolescence outside of the 0 to 3 phase is the quickest developmental time in their lives. Their brains are changing, their physicality is changing. There's a whole bunch of normative stressors that are happening at the same time. And with the chronic stressors that can happen with multiple deployments, that's where I was talking about before. We have to be careful about not overtaxing the system.
And does it take just time and practice of those skills? And can you measure some expectations on that? Give us a month
Right.
or 2 weeks or 3 months?
Right, that's really difficult, and part of it depends, again, on how the family was prior to the deployment, what the communication was like during the deployment, and then what the expectations were and how they were managed on the way back. So I think on average, I've been associated with multiple programs that try to do reintegration experiences for families, and nobody comes because they want to be home for the first 6 months.
Right.
They don't want to go out to another activity.
You know, I said a moment ago that the soldier who's been deployed has changed too, and Sergeant Bowman, you've lived it. What were those reintegration issues for you coming home?
I mean, it was tough, and being in the Special Forces, I had opportunity to, work in Central and South America, Peru, Argentina, Venezuela, Ecuador, and I seen my colleagues, especially with their kids and their family, and how hard it was to be able to come back and, relearn your wife's all over again. It's tough. For the last 17 years, after I lost both my legs, I've been watching this great big change, and which I think is really great that we have changed. And a lot of my presentations that I travel around are telling these kids or our students or our veterans that if you're willing and accepting of a change and you have a great attitude, you can accomplish anything. And as I use what happened to myself through a tragedy, losing my best friend, the military, my family,